It wasn't gradual. It was a crack, a shatter. One day, everything made sense, and the next, your body felt like a stranger. The familiar turned foreign. Time split in half, before and after. You look fine on the outside, but inside, systems misfiring, questions multiplying. People couldn't see it, but you felt every shift, every wrong note in your body's quiet song. There was no script for this, no warning label, just symptoms stacking like a slow avalanche. You kept moving, thinking it would pass, but the body always tells the truth, even when we try to silence it. You weren't lazy, you weren't weak, you were ill, but no one said it out loud, not even you, because naming it meant it was real, and real was terrifying. Doctors spoke in riddles. Friends gave advice that stung more than silence. You smiled anyway, hoping it would hide the unraveling, but pretending got heavy, and grief crept in where understanding should have lived. You mourned your energy, your routines, the version of you who didn't have to calculate how much strength a shower would take. You learned that rest isn't weakness, it's survival. You feared becoming a burden, so you hid the worst parts. Laughed when it hurt, nodded when you wanted to scream, but even invisible wounds leave scars. The calendar betrayed you, plans canceled, promises paused. You watched life move forward without you, and wondered if you'd ever catch up. But healing doesn't follow dates, it follows breath. You hated the word chronic, like it sentenced you to a lifetime of limitation. But over time, you stopped fighting the label and started redefining what strength really means. People told you to just stay positive. You needed more than silver linings. You needed space to grieve, to rest, to be. Healing begins when we stop pretending joy is the only story worth telling. You started measuring days in spoons, not minutes, not hours, just capacity. What could you give without breaking? How could you show up without disappearing? It wasn't about doing everything. It was about surviving the next moment. There were days you mourned your own body, not because you hated it, but because you missed who you were before the ache. Healing meant learning to love a vessel you no longer recognized. You lost things, energy, clarity, belonging, but you also found new things, boundaries, softness, and a deeper reverence for rest. Illness took, but it also introduced you to versions of yourself you hadn't yet met. You didn't ask for this, but still you adapted. You rebuilt. You found meaning in the pause. And even though the pain never asked for permission, your strength never asked for validation. If this mirrors your story, if you've carried invisible battles too heavy to name, take a breath. You're not alone. Share this with someone navigating their own quiet storm. Healing loves company. You learn to redefine productivity, not in tasks crossed off, but in breaths taken, in tears allowed, in choosing gentleness over grind. The world measured your pace, but you began to listen to your body instead. Your friendships changed. Some drifted, some disappeared, and some stayed, not to fix, but simply to witness. Those were the ones who made space for your silence and still stayed close. There were days you didn't recognize yourself. Your reflection wore fatigue like armor, but beneath it, a soft kind of beauty was forming, the kind born only in fires you never thought you'd survive. You stopped performing health, stopped pretending you were fine to keep others comfortable. You chose truth over ease. And in that truth, you found power that performance could never hold. Every morning you wake up, even in pain, is a kind of rebellion, a quiet protest against despair. And that makes you brave, whether or not the world sees it. You learn the difference between healing and curing. One means going back to how things were. The other means making peace with what is. You chose healing, even when it didn't look like progress. On some days, healing felt like defeat, when progress meant simply surviving. But surviving wasn't small. It was a quiet triumph, the kind of victory that doesn't get applause, but deserves it anyway. You started keeping new kinds of score, not by what you did, but by what you honored. Did you rest when needed? Did you breathe through fear? Did you choose yourself over performance? That's growth. There were moments of stillness that didn't feel like waiting anymore. Just existing, fully. No future forecast, no shame, just breath, presence. You weren't behind, you were alive. Grief didn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looked like irritability, detachment, numbness. But beneath it all was love for the version of you that didn't have to fight this hard. You stopped apologizing for needing more time, more space, more care. Your needs weren't inconveniences, they were messages. You finally started listening. You saw others heal faster, get answers, move on, and you almost turned your story into a comparison. But healing isn't linear. It isn't competitive. It's deeply, wildly personal. You stopped waiting for a return to normal. Normal had passed. In its place grew something quieter, slower, wiser. A life shaped not by urgency, but by awareness. Your illness didn't steal your identity. It revealed it. In the quiet, you remembered who you are beyond productivity, speed, and noise. Still worthy, still whole. Ever had to rebuild your life from a place of stillness? Drop a comment if you've been forced to slow down and found yourself in the process. You're not the only one navigating this new rhythm. You stopped chasing your old self, not because you gave up, but because you realized she no longer fit. You've grown into someone softer, stronger, aligned not with expectation, but with truth. Some days you still missed her, the version of you who didn't flinch at fatigue. But instead of mourning her, you started honoring her by surviving as this you, this wiser you. People asked, "How are you feeling?" And you'd say, "Fine." But fine was code for tired, scared, unsure. You just didn't have the energy to explain. And that's okay. You began to speak more honestly, not always out loud, but to yourself. This hurts. This is hard. This is unfair. And in naming the truth, you made room for healing. What others saw as weakness, you began to name as wisdom. Slowness became intentionality. Tears became processing. Saying no became self-respect. You weren't waiting to be rescued anymore. You were learning to hold your own hand, to sit in the dark without rushing the light. That's not passive, that's powerful. Rest stopped feeling like defeat. It became a rhythm, a sacred pause. You weren't lazy, you were listening. And what you heard was, stay, soften, heal. You redefined courage. It wasn't loud. It wasn't epic. It was showing up to the day with no guarantee it'd be kind. Courage was brushing your teeth, replying to a text, breathing. The world told you to bounce back. You decided to root down, to dig deeper instead of rushing forward. You weren't behind. You were growing underground. You realized that healing wasn't just about feeling better. It was about being honest, even when you didn't. It was choosing presence, not perfection. And presence was enough. You stopped needing to prove your pain. You realized not everyone would understand, and that's okay. Validation became internal. Healing became yours alone, not a group project. You stopped needing to prove your pain and started trusting your truth. You found magic in the mundane, a deep breath, a quiet sip of tea, a moment without pain. These weren't small wins, they were sacred ones. You no longer waited for perfect health to live your life. You started weaving joy into your limitations, not because it was easy, but because you deserved to feel alive, even in fragments. The diagnosis never defined you. It described a part of your journey, but not your identity. You are not what happened to your body. You are how you rise through it. If you've ever carried an invisible illness, comment below. Let others know they're not alone. This space, it's for the ones still glowing in the dark. You are seen. You stopped apologizing for needing help. Interdependence became a strength, not shame. You weren't weaker for leaning. You were human, and humans are made to hold each other. Recovery wasn't a straight line. Some days, you felt okay. Others, like starting over. But you began treating relapse not as failure, but as part of the rhythm. You let go of needing to be high-functioning. Instead, you started being real, whole, present. Wholeness wasn't performance. It was permission to be all your parts, even the weary ones. You stopped comparing your timeline to others. This was your life, your pace, and that meant redefining milestones. Sometimes, getting out of bed was the win, and that was enough. You realized that healing didn't make you more lovable. You were already lovable in the middle of it, in the ache, in the mess, in the now. You began trusting your own body again. Not fully, not always, but enough to listen, enough to thank it for carrying you through the storm, even if it limped. You stopped searching for your old life. You started creating a new one where softness was strategy, where pacing was power, where rest wasn't an afterthought, it was a practice. You made peace with not being understood by everyone. Your healing wasn't a broadcast. It was sacred, private, yours, and the ones meant for you understood, even in the silence. You still have hard days, but now you meet them with grace, not force. You learned that gentleness was a kind of armor too, one that didn't require you to fight to feel worthy. The world still moves fast, but you've learned to move differently, to walk slower, to notice more. You're no longer racing, you're living. You've become the kind of person who checks in with others, not because you weren't checked on, but because you know how powerful it is to be seen. You've turned your pain into wisdom, not loudly, not for show, but quietly, like a lighthouse, unmoving, still, and deeply necessary. You've learned to live in cycles, not ladders. Some days ascend, some spiral, some pause, but all are valid, all are movement, all are part of you. You're not healed, you're healing, still soft, still sacred, still trying, and in that trying, there's proof you haven't given up on yourself. That's more than enough, because survival, too, is a kind of grace. If this episode met you where words couldn't, subscribe, share it, let others know they aren't healing alone. This isn't the end of your story. It's the page you turn when you're ready.